Welcome to the Sober Life Rocks podcast. I'm your host, Margie Schaller, and I want to welcome you today and let you know that you're not alone. You may have made the decision not to drink alcohol, or at the very least, not at work-related events. Whether you've never been a drinker, are in recovery, or made a health-related decision, we see you. In today's world, networking and socializing and celebrations, they seem to happen over drinks, and I know the struggle can be real. Through this podcast, we're changing that narrative. We're here to create a community where individuals like you who choose not to drink or drink less can find camaraderie, support, and practical advice. So let's get the conversation started. It's my privilege to introduce you to Brendan Mahoney. Now, Brendan, he retired at the end of 2023. Congratulations.
Yay,
After
retirement.
10 years of serving General Counsel for HBI International. He served as Mayor Stanton's Senior Policy Advisor, responsible for economic development, arts and culture, historic preservation, biosciences, aviation, and liaison to the LGBT and Asian communities. Brendan led the mayor's team to enact Phoenix's LGBT non-discrimination ordinances. Now, I have this long bio, Brendan, and it goes on and on about all of the community things you have done throughout your career. I mean, really, you're just an incredibly giving man. But on a personal note, you have been in a long-term relationship for 29 years. You've been sober for 30, and you spend your leisure time cooking, playing the harpsichord, using too much butter in food, and spoiling your two undisciplined and much loved beagles. Well, I just love that so much. And I'm so excited to have you here with us on the Sober Life Rocks podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, I kind of skipped over a bunch. Was there anything else really important out of that resume that needs sharing for people to understand who you are?
I would only add in the context here that while I started my career as a lawyer, not yet sober, I very quickly found my way into a recovery program. And so almost the entirety of my legal career in private practice and other capacities has been sober.
Okay, well, great. So let's even start before that, because I feel like it's so helpful to understand somebody's origin story. And I would just love to know, like, in the context of your growing up, where did alcohol fit? And sort of what was the environment in your family of origin regarding alcohol?
No surprise that both of my parents were active alcoholics.
Okay.
Neither ever found recovery. And there are wonderful things about growing up. My parents were academics. I love to laugh about how they had this great idea that explains a lot about me, that next to every bathroom in the house was a complete set of encyclopedias. Do not play Trivial Pursuit with me. So that, they didn't, it took me a while to understand they didn't set out for that to happen to them. And there was a lot of unpleasantness surrounding it that eventually I was able to find my way to forgiveness. So alcohol played a big role, and I swore I was never going to do that. And then I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely relate to that. I thought I'd never be like my mom, and then I found myself in my 20s just like my mom.
Yep.
So tell me about kind of, you went to college, eventually to law school. Where did alcohol play a part in that world, and how did you frame it in your mind?
Sure. So I was kind of a really tightly wound kid, terrible self-esteem, and did not fit into the world. And on top of that, I was a young gay kid and didn't even know what that meant. So it's kind of a double whammy. And my reaction to my household circumstances was to be an overachiever. So I love that I have a law degree, a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, and no high school degree. I just left, and I finished college when I was 19, and I hadn't started drinking yet. And between college and graduate school that summer, I discovered cigarettes, marijuana, and alcohol in the same week, and I was off and running. Because I was getting ready to start graduate school at University of Chicago, and I was terrified. And it, I found my release, and it made me feel comfortable. But it boomerangs, doesn't it? It works at first, and then it boomerang. But so that's where it started. And I actually drank my way all the way through law school. Finished at the
And was
top.
that common with your peers?
Well, with the peers that I hung around with, it was. Yeah. And I did really, really well in law school because I'm just the classic overachiever. I was at the top of my class, drinking my way through everything. Um, it wasn't until I started practicing law and the progression of alcoholism and getting older, and I just couldn't do it anymore. I was worn out. I'd wake up, I felt awful. And yeah, so I was a late bloomer as alcohol goes. I didn't start as a teenager. Well, I was still technically a teenager. I was 19, but it was rather late.
Well, because I know a lot of people, I mean, myself included, I drank in college and I didn't think anything of it because that was kind of the culture. Now,
Yeah,
granted, I was the chug champ of my sorority, so there could have been a clue there. But then in my, 20s, same thing. It was like that was the currency of connection. You get together for drinks, or you go to the bar, or you have people over and everybody brings, a six pack of something or another. So it didn't seem like a problem to me.
it didn't seem like a problem to me either, although people would comment, and I was proud of the fact that I could drink anyone under the table.
Right.
And I thought of it all as sort of a sophisticated bon vivant lifestyle. I like to laugh now about how I fancied myself a wine connoisseur, especially if it came in a cheap vodka bottle. Because the wine rack rarely had wine in it by the end. And but it was all part of us. I felt sophisticated and engaged, but I knew, for example, when I finished law school and I moved to Phoenix and I started in a big firm, a really prestigious um, job to land as a first year associate, I never drank at firm events.
Huh,
It
why not?
dawned on me I should not drink. I do not want anyone to see this about me.
Uh-huh.
No one told me don't drink at these events. I just knew better.
Now, I don't know much about law firms and the legal world. So what is that environment like?
Um, so at least this is early, it was 1991. And the world was changing, but it hadn't fully changed. Most of the lawyers there had been lawyers in the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So there were bars on every floor, and people went out and drank at lunch. Um, that was common. Yeah, and a lot of heavy drinking. And
Mhm,
but I knew better than I didn't want anyone to see that about me. So something inside of me knew that I was off track. Yeah.
mhm,
Um,
mhm.
I would just go home every night and drink.
It's so interesting. I myself had that same inkling because I only ever drink at home. And when I'd go to a party, I would, a friend's house, I would severely either not drink at all or limit myself to one drink because I knew, if I drink the way I wanted to drink, I would show a side of me I didn't want to show.
Yeah, yeah, I do.
But for many people, I mean, they're just fitting into the crowd. And that's just the way that they drink because everybody else is drinking that way.
That's right. The
Yeah.
and some people don't drink every day. They binge. And other
Mhm.
people make public displays of themselves, and some of us know how to hide it. Those are just facts. What's going on inside is the same.
Yeah.
We all share the same thing.
So take me there. Take me to that place that you knew you couldn't drink in public. And then what happened from there?
I remember very clearly. One morning, and was not given to prayer, but one morning I remember saying, "Oh God, I think I'm trapped. I need some help."
Trapped
And
how?
I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that the word I use now is I felt like a slave. I realized I was captive. It finally dawned on me that I'm like, oh, oh shit. I need some help. And that same day, several friends came and confronted me about drinking later in the day and said, I remember saying, well, yeah, I know. I think I need to lay off for a little bit. And someone said, no, you actually need to quit and you need to go to AA. And I said, well, okay, I'll think about that next week. This was a Sunday. And I said, oh no, there's an AA meeting in an hour and we're taking you there. And they took me and pushed me through the door. And that's my sobriety date.
Wow.
But I knew, and I knew, and something deep inside of me knew, oh shit, what am I going to do? And I don't necessarily want to talk about an interventionist God, but it's very clear to me that there was a relationship between my inner deep recognition of the problem and then the solution presenting itself immediately as
Yeah.
undeniable. Yeah.
Completely not a coincidence.
Completely not a coincidence. Yeah. Yeah.
Were these people that were in the profession or friends that were out of the profession?
Friends out of the profession. Yeah.
Okay, so you get pulled kicking and screaming into this AA room, sort of resigned to the fact. Like, what is that like being a lawyer going into AA?
So at first I didn't reveal that. Um, for a lot of reasons, which we can talk about. But I very quickly realized there were other professionals there. And then I met other lawyers. And then I met a lawyer at my law firm. Just like,
Oh
oh,
no.
hello. And yeah. So I got past that pretty quickly. And then I was introduced to an unlisted meeting where lawyers and judges went. And I went to that for a while. I found it interesting, but ultimately I just kind of hang around mainstream recovery rooms. I want to be careful about identifying the group because of the traditions, but so
Yep.
yeah.
And so what did that mean for you professionally? What happened there?
With recognizing the person,
That or just like now you have this,
that's
did you have an anxiety about
a,
being in AA and at your work?
sure, sure at first. But actually one of the best things that happened was running into somebody from work. Because they calmed me down about it. And but like, you're gonna meet other people here, it's not that big of a deal. That person at that point probably had 15 years or so of sobriety and just sort of talked me off of the ledge. Like, just, it's going to be fine. It's going to be just fine. Recovery is a sign of strength, not weakness. It's, you might run into people who think that about you, but that's their problem, not yours. And so I got some really good, solid advice right up front. Yeah.
Nice. Now you had a huge advantage because you hadn't been drinking at work.
Yeah.
And so this was now not a change.
Yeah, I hadn't been drinking at work, and I generally didn't socialize at work either. Largely because I wanted to socialize with other people who drank like I did, and I didn't want anyone at work to know that. So, that I didn't think it through that way, but that's what happened is I had outside sets of friends. But pretty quickly into recovery, it became apparent to me that I did not like where I was. Um, and it's nothing about that law firm. It was about the nature of being in a big, competitive setting. and which is what big law firms are. And they're really great for some people and not the right fit for other people. And so I moved on. Yeah.
And then what?
I moved on first to work with a solo practitioner I had met in AA. So he was in recovery. And I did that for a few years. And then I moved to another smaller law firm that had a dozen lawyers and stayed there for a while. Over time, as people retired or died, it became my law firm. So, I was
Nice.
a name partner and I ran the law firm. And then I took a leave of absence to go work at the mayor's office. And then instead of returning to my law firm, I went to an old client and became general counsel for the last 10 years. So we can dive into what that means, but I made some conscious decisions after being sober for a couple of years to change my professional trajectory as a
Mhm.
result of being sober.
So nonetheless, um, I know, legal and dental and accounting, whatever, it's no different, right? We have to get to know our clients and prospective clients over meals or over drinks or at events or so how did you navigate that aspect?
Um, so rather quickly, I stopped being shy about it, and I would most often make a flippant joke to take away the tension. When someone would say, "Oh, do you want something to drink?" My answer would be something like, "Not unless you want me to stand on the table, take all of my clothes off, and set the restaurant on fire." And people would laugh and say, "Look, I quit drinking for a reason, and we're good." And the fact that I could laugh about it made everyone else comfortable. Usually, it would be followed with, "Oh, do you mind if we drink?" And it's like, "Not a problem. Go ahead." Yeah.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
love that response.
Yeah, and I know, and it just eased because people feel really awkward. They don't know how to deal with the fact that I'm sober or they want to do the right thing. And so just give them permission to feel at ease. Right, take away the tension.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask the question that I
Yeah.
know a lot of people probably are thinking. I'm looking to my lawyer to be ultimately trustworthy to me, to hold my secrets, to take care of my assets, to do whatever the things are. Did you have the sense that your being out about your recovery impacted your ability to build that trust with clients, or that maybe people didn't hire you because of that?
I imagine there are probably people who didn't hire me because of that, but I think the by far the most common reaction was, "Oh, I have a brother. Oh, I have a parent. And wow, I really respect what you're doing." And so it just generally was not a problem. Yeah.
I
That
love
was the
that.
most
I
common
love that.
reaction. Yeah. Yeah.
See, this is the thing. I mean, at Sober Life Rocks, one of our main missions is to normalize sobriety or
Yeah.
normalize sober choices, whatever those are. There are people I know who aren't in addiction, but they just choose not to drink at professional events. There's other people who
Sure.
are in recovery. There are people who just, for religious reasons or health reasons, it shouldn't matter what's in our cup. But I love the fact that by being transparent, you actually built trust.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. By being transparent, people realized, "Oh, he's honest and trustworthy because he just told me something that most people don't talk about." Yeah. And I was just like, "Here it is." Yeah. I'm not ashamed of it in the least. I actually think it's one of my bigger accomplishments, the part I played in that,
Yeah.
getting and staying sober. I didn't do it by myself, but it didn't happen without my participation and hard work. Yeah.
I love that. So, can you talk about how you feel that the work that you just mentioned to be sober, stay sober, has affected you in your profession?
So someone once called it the great bait and switch recovery. You come to recovery to quit drinking, and we tell you we can help you do that. The bait and switch is we're going to teach you how to live a completely different life. Um, really. And that doesn't always become apparent at first. Everything is so focused on staying sober. But I remember when I was working on step 6, making my sponsor said, I want you list all of your shortcomings. You should have that from 4 and 5. And then I want you to list your character assets. What's good about you? I was sitting there stumped for a while. And then I realized that the word remove doesn't mean to pluck away necessarily. It can mean to move from one place to another. The soldiers removed to their quarters. Okay. And it dawned on me that every one of my character defects was a character asset. And my problem is I'm out of balance. That was like a oh moment. Um, and I started thinking about, well, what kind of person do I want to be? I I realized that I hadn't planned this for myself. So what I really who do I want to be? Who am I? And when those questions and answers start arising, it's very hard not to visit your career as part of it. We practice these principles in all our affairs. And so if there are certain ways I want to carry myself in the world, I may need to change how I do my job. And I did. Um,
Can you give me an example?
um, so most people think of a lawyer as a hired gun. And and I at one point
Isn't
put
it?
I put on my wall right behind my desk, and I had it there for years. A saying from a famous lawyer named Elihu Root. He was Woodrow Wilson's lawyer. Elihu Root wrote that the saying which I put on my wall is about half the practice of any decent lawyer is telling the client they're a damn fool and should stop it. And so instead of being a hired gun, I actually started being more of a counselor and would assert my limits. Yeah, I'm not going to do that for you. You might need to find another lawyer. That's not how I work. Um, and giving people advice that it might seem counterproductive to me, but it was important. I mean, it was not in my own self-interest. We'll give an example of a client who had a senior staff person embezzling a lot of money, gambling problem. And when we fired the employee, we got sued for age discrimination. And so we had all the evidence, and unemployment had been denied because of this evidence. So we go to mediation. Eventually, they're willing to settle, but they want $5,000. That's down from they wanted 275. They insist on a payment to them of 5,000. And my client is like, this is ridiculous. Why should I pay? She stole from me. I said, yeah, can't guarantee outcomes, but you have a really good case here. You're probably going to win it. And it's the kind of case where you'll get attorney's fees paid too. You're going to get a big judgment against this person. But she's a gambling addict and you'll never collect any of it. And you're going to be mad at me. And in the meantime, you're going to spend 2 years of your life stuck in this moment of being a victim of theft, as opposed to moving on emotionally and economically. Work on your business. They were mad. They did it, but I mean, they slammed the door on the way out. A year later, and the guys were saying, I can charge you 150 grand to do this trial. I'd love to have the money, but it's not in your best interests. And a year later, I was out having dinner, and the former client apparently is in the same restaurant, comes across the restaurant to my table, and I look up, it's like, oh, okay. And she says, I want you to know that was the best advice anyone has ever given me. Put it behind me. Business is thriving. Thank you so much. So I had to change the way I was going to be a lawyer and not just be a hired gun and actually think about people's emotions and their feelings and outcomes and who I want to be, you know,
You
so
know,
those examples.
I
Yeah.
I love that so much. I mean, again, just bringing it back to Sober Life Rocks, one of the things that we do is we have daily emails that go out to our members, as well as we have a expert, sort of a life coach once a month come and do a talk with us. And all of those things are pointed towards being that more whole person
Mhm.
and really examining the life that we want to live.
Mhm.
Because for me, at least, and many I've talked to, when we were drinking too much, choices stopped being an option.
Yeah,
You know, I,
choice is not being an option. And I think what underlies drinking, the recovery materials tell us, is 100 forms of fear and self-centeredness, self-seeking, driven by 100 forms of fear. And so the fear skews our perceptions and our reactions to life. Um, and so when we start to clear that away, I need to kind of back way up in time and say, I started making lots of choices that were not good choices, but they're because they were based in fear. Um, what do I want for myself? Who am I? And start really looking honestly and saying, for people who are watching, we might be talking in code that's a little over people's heads. I want to explain how fear affects our choices. Um, the normal sequence for people is something happens, we have an emotional feeling, and then we react to it. So if I walk out into the street and I see a car coming right at me, I feel fear and I react by running. Good. But if I'm full of irrational, unidentified fears, so the fear comes first instead of in response to something, it's out of sequence. I walk out into the street full of fear and there's a car 4 blocks away and I run. That's what I did my whole life. I made all of my choices based on this fear that I didn't even know. And so I needed to kind of pull that all apart and then ask as an adult, what do I want? And then go get it. I'm not talking about material stuff. I'm talking about what kind of person do I want to be? Who am I? Someone else put it really well, said, if you want to improve your self-esteem, do esteemable things. Duh. Yeah,
seems simple enough.
seems simple enough, but when you're full of fear, that just none of that works. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to transition a little bit because one of the other things you mentioned was, you know, by seeing other people who were like you or on the same journey, that really helped you to sort of relax into this recovery and specifically for you and for me early on, it was AA. But you and I had a conversation before this and we talked about what we are looking for from our lives once we are past the, oh God, how do I get through all of these things without drinking? And where do we find the people that we can really have the conversations with that are relevant to the stage of our lives or our careers that we're in? So, so I'd love for you to kind of share a little bit about that piece of it for you.
Yeah. It isn't quite so easy just to like have dial a drunk lawyer and find someone. It doesn't quite work like that. But I the nature of what I want to talk about and what I want out of a friendship and a relationship changed. And therefore, my friends and relationships changed. Someone once said, can you imagine walking into a bar, sitting down, ordering a beer, and turning to the stranger next to you and saying, so let's talk about fear? Um, so I know. So the nature of what I do and what I talk about and how I interact with people meant that I just drew different friends. And it takes a little bit of time, but you will make different and new friends that are um, much more that people may or may not be in recovery, but they're much more attuned to where we are at in life. Uh,
Mhm.
and certainly by being open about it, I worked with the state bar, the member assistance committee, and so on. I certainly met other peers in my profession and built relationships there too with other sober lawyers,
Mhm.
for sure. Um, it's actually not that hard to find other people. There are lots of us out there. It's surprising.
Yeah.
It's actually very, very easy. Um, and so I met people. I I wanted to be engaged in the community, doing nonprofit charity work, political advocacy, other things. And there are tons of people around who were just like me, that were doing it for the same reasons, and many of them sober. And so I just met I have a really rich social life as a result. Not a problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
so if people are worried about, oh, I'm going to be isolated, you might feel like that at first. It won't last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I know for me, I mean, and I've shared this before on this podcast, like when I first got into AA, I mean, I didn't know how to do anything without having drinking being part of it. You know, I didn't know how to cook dinner or watch TV or any of that. So it didn't matter to me who was delivering that message. Like I was just desperate enough for anybody who would be there to help me. And I was surrounded by this amazing community. I got sober in an area of fairly um, blue collar-ish people. And so, you know, I was friends with bus drivers and teachers and mechanics and all of the amazing strength and love that they poured into me. Like I'm forever grateful. They invited me and my kids to parties. Like it was amazing. The challenge for me came when I was now back to ready to being successful in my career. You know, I'd maintained my job through all that, but now I was ready to level up. You know, now I was ready to get into the executive suite and start really making the moves. And I really didn't have anybody who in my recovery community who I could relate to, who could sort of guide me. Um, and not to say that that made them better or worse than me. I just didn't have anyone who had been on that
Right.
journey.
Right.
Now, I know that you said that there are unlisted legal groups, and there
Right.
are the same for doctors or dentists, but outside of that particular avenue, how were you able to navigate that piece of your recovery?
So, like you, almost all of my relationships within recovery are not with other lawyers. They're with people.
Yeah.
I'm not any better or worse than anyone else. And so when it came to professional development, I looked outside of recovery. And I found a mentor, who has been my close friend and confidant for since the mid 90s. And 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 other people, but I actually had to look outside for someone who had their head on straight and could give me guidance. It isn't necessarily recovery specific. Um, it's professional guidance. Yeah, and that's what I did.
Yeah. I think for me, part of the challenge, I mean, obviously I had other friends in professional circles, but things like I know that bonding happens at the bar, that people go, you know, to happy hour or drinks at a conference or whatever. And so you rub shoulders with the right people, right? And you get introduced to the influential next steps, and you bond over the funny experiences that happened that night. Or, I don't play golf, but many people go out and golf and they drink their whole way through the golf. And the best advice that I was getting was, if you feel uncomfortable, have an exit strategy. So an exit strategy is great for my recovery, but not so great for that career development piece of it. I didn't have anywhere to go to talk about how to navigate those kind of
Sure.
things.
And yeah, they're especially early in recovery, having an exit strategy if you're around people drinking is critical.
Crucial.
What I discovered is part of what I had to own up to is um, there is an old boys network, and drinking or not drinking, I'm never going to be part of it. I'm a young gay guy at that point, young. Um, I'm not I'm not going to be part of their network. I had to go find other networks. And there are other networks outside of bars and the ninth hole, where you can go and meet people and find work. If you're doing that, look, trying to make relationships that are for client development, so on. There are lots of places to do that. It is not the reason why I did so much nonprofit work on boards. But that's a traditional way that people do stuff too. And I met lots of other lawyers and accountants and people who would refer me cases because they liked me because they didn't meet me at the bar. They met me doing something that they like to do. And so you can find other ways to do that.
That's really, really helpful. Yeah. And I think you're right. I mean, pushing myself into this mold to go be one of the guys or whatever as a sober woman, it felt uncomfortable in every which way. And ultimately it didn't lead to where I wanted it to lead me
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But I guess this is a common thing that I hear from people is, how do you have those sorts of networking when you're sober? And what I hear you saying is, have different networking when you're sober.
Yeah, and it isn't unique to being sober. How do you network when you're gay? How do you network when you're a Black lawyer? How do you network if you're a female lawyer? When we're all looking to the old boys club and trying to break in,
Yeah.
there are lots of other clubs. You don't need to aspire to that club. There are lots of other clubs that you can go network in.
Yeah.
That's the answer. Yeah.
So let's fast forward all the way to today. Things are changing, which is great. We see young people are less interested in drinking than our generations were. People are more health conscious. They are more open and accepting of the different groups, which is amazing. And yet there's still a stigma. What would you say to people in today's world who feel the anxiety around the stigma of being in recovery?
Often, again, humor can sort of calm stuff down. I tell people who are curious about why am I in recovery and what happened, and they're sort of starting to think of it because there's a stigma. It People perceive it as weakness, inability to control yourself, and so on. And my response to that is, there are basically two kinds of dogs. There's one dog who you can put a feeding bowl out and they eat what they need, and they come back later when they need more. And another dog, like my beagles here, if I put the bowl out, they will eat everything until they vomit, because they have no appetite control. They'll just eat, 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 eat. So like, that's the way I drink. I don't have any control over this. And it isn't a moral problem or anything else. It's just I don't have an off switch. And so I don't drink. That's simple. And people, oh, okay. It took me a while to figure out I needed to turn that I don't have an off switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what makes it alcoholism is that we wouldn't usually think of someone allergic to strawberries. They break out in hives, craving hives, and constantly tempting. They just don't eat strawberries. But alcoholics keep going back and back and back, trying it over again. And finally it dawns on me. It took a while ago, like, oh, me and alcohol are a really bad combination. I should not do that. You know, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
But it isn't
Well,
a moral thing. It's just like, oh, it took me a while to figure out I have no business doing that. Doesn't work for me. Yeah.
yeah. Are there any questions I didn't ask you or things that you burning desires to share with the audience?
I mentioned at the top of this that it'd been a rough couple days because a really good friend died. The 10th step suggests that we regularly take inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. But there's more to the inventory than looking at fault or it's looking, what am I doing that's good? How am I how am I living the life I think I want to live? And so looking at that recently because of what happened, I realized that, I hate going to hospitals, but for a year and a half, I missed 2 days. Otherwise, I was there every single day visiting, supporting his husband and so on. That's not to pat myself on the back. That's just saying that's what recovery offers us is the ability to be the kind of people that we aspire to be. And that can happen in your profession too. And the profession, instead of being a struggle and trying to figure out how to work recovery with my profession, eventually it becomes a really meaningful part of life because it's part of who I am and I'm living it within. My profession is being performed with integrity,
Hmm.
my personal integrity. Bring that to your profession, and recovery teaches us how to do that.
And what message do you have for the lawyer out there who is scared but knows that maybe things have gotten out of hand?
You should be scared. Um, every month, the Lawyer magazine comes out in every state. And the first place that everyone goes is to the back, who got disciplined. And one of my early sponsees just appeared in this month's issue, disbarred. I lost track of him a long time ago. He went out, disbarred. So you should be scared. If you're a lawyer and you're drinking alcoholically, you are going to harm yourself and harm your clients and end up disbarred. So go get help. The good news is that on the other side of the help, you can have a really meaningful career, be the kind of lawyer you want it to be, and have meaningful family relationships and friendships, all of what you want. But if you continue drinking, you just blow it all up. It inevitably.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Remember, no one ever regrets not drinking the morning after. And every decision that you make today shapes the smiles of your tomorrows. So keep making choices that brighten your world and the world around you. Thank you, Brendan.
I love that. Nobody ever regrets not drinking the morning after. I'm going to steal that from you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Until next time, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.